would say that the internship at URI completely changed my career path.
My experience with URI is ever present in what I do, so it seems strange to feel as though the URI is somehow in my past. The URI is in my present and in my future.
None of this would have happened had it not been for URI. It really had an impact on my professional life. Not just an impact, but it really gave me, my professional life.
I was the director of the Tropical Resources Institute, and there was an African-American, Dr. Ralph Jones, who had just been appointed head of Rec and Parks Department in Baltimore. And I told him what we were doing in Nepal, and he said, well, why aren't you doing that here in the cities? That sounds just like what we need. And then we arranged to bring Dr. Jones up here and talk to students, and there was enthusiasm both ways that this was a really necessary thing. Why hadn't we done it before? And then Dr. Jones had a heart attack, a young fellow too, and so I felt even more strongly that we needed to do something. And so in '89, Morgan Grove was a student here, and I said, I have a deal you can't refuse. I said, how would you like to be our first intern?
Birch said that he wanted me to go to Baltimore to do this. And I said, well, I already have a summer job. And Birch said, well, quit it.
Because the idea was our students would go down as interns, but then we would provide housing and some support.
And when we tried to come up with a name, we talked about calling it an institute or something like that. And the folks in Baltimore said, don't call it an institute or something like that, because it just sounds like something that nothing will ever get done. So it's got to be called an initiative, that we're going to be forward-looking and forward-doing.
So Morgan made it a success. So next year we sent 3 or 4 interns. Pretty soon we had like 15 or so interns down there.
The type of projects we initially engaged in were very simple, and I mean that in a wonderful way, and humble. They were projects using nature in its broadest sense, or using the environment as a way to revitalize, reclaim, reestablish, restore some aspect of a community. This meant a lot of community gardens, a lot of tree nurseries, a lot of street tree plantings.
Just walking into neighborhoods where we had no idea whether we would be accepted or completely rejected, but yet, this was our job, this is what we had to do. And walking into different community groups that had no idea what forestry was and what environmental activism was, in a place where there was just so much neglect and abandonment by any city service. So acceptance was amazing to me, that I could actually walk into these community groups, walk into these neighborhoods, walk through these neighborhoods, and actually feel like we could make these contacts and connections and get something done.
And going down to Baltimore, he always set it up. We were learning from people there. I mean, that's a classic Birch concept, that we weren't going with the knowledge. There weren't these 25-year-olds going down to save Baltimore. We were going down to learn from people in Baltimore and contribute as we could. There was a sense early on that, wow, I could go, to Madagascar to do something really cool, or I could go to inner city Baltimore and New Haven. And so that sometimes was a sell in the early years of why would I stick around here when I could, see the world?
Because the idea was in TRI they were going out to some exotic place. Well, that's a whole lot different than in a place where they're your fellow citizens and they can say, get out of my neighborhood, I don't want you, or whatever.
The argument that we made, and I think compellingly, was that you could learn as much or more in this environment, in this intense environment, and also to say go to work in the inner city and become a forester made very little sense to anyone but Bill, and of course he was totally right.
People had looked at ecologies in the city, but the city as an ecosystem, nobody had been doing that.
We have created a new profession, or we have realized a profession that no one, I think, would have dreamed of.